into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Body is reality. Body is reality. Alex is like wandering in here in a black cloak, and we're about to rip him open, and multiple organs are just going to spill out of his stomach like a whale.
Wants to cut me.
He's laying in the
Wants to cut me up.
the surgery machine.
Is this going to be like that movie Akira?
No, what's good? I was referencing a different movie, but sure, yeah, he looked.
A movie I saw with Andrew, so I know he's seen it. Crimes of the Future, remember? Crimes of the Future?
Yeah, we should have asked our guest about that.
Yeah, we should ask her about.
What do you think about too many extra organs and making them as art, and how it's like sex kind of to cut them out?
Yeah, it's also kind of like
What do you think about that?
the movie itself. What do you think about that?
What do you think about that?
Is that in your book?
See, if it was Akira, you'd do the like, do, do, da, 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 da. That's their whole soundtrack. They got like guys chanting that.
Akira kind of fits into what I'm doing here. I'm trying to do a body horror motif for the episode, and that is definitely with the guy's arm turning into a bunch of organs and shit.
That's what I'm remembering. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that happens.
Also, there's a guy named Canada in it. That's weird.
It's not Canada.
Is it?
What is it?
Takana?
Canada.
Yeah, it's Canada.
It's not Canada.
His name is Canada.
I guess in that you're like Jack Flores. His name is Canada.
Yeah, it just depends on how you pronounce. You know how many people call me that? Every cab driver ever.
Listen,
Uber-
Jack. What bar are we going to?
It'd be funny.
We're going tonight.
Body is reality, Jack.
They put him in a nuclear reactor. They put a boy in the reactor. They had to seal him away because his brain got too big, opened up the mind explosion. Jack,
You get sucked into a television set.
it's a 3-hour movie. It's not clear what the plot is, Jack.
They whip you. It looks like maybe a snuff film. You go crazy watching it. You chase the manufacturer down to a small town in Pennsylvania. Get sucked into the whole thing yourself. They call it Videodrome, Jack.
I'm trying to think which movie would be the best way to sabotage the Biden administration by showing him a movie and having him respond to it. I think Akira, Crimes of the Future, or Videodrome. I guess Crimes of the Future would be the most upsetting one for him.
That would be the one you'd have to sit Joe Biden down and be like, make sure you try your best to pay attention because it's not like an action movie.
Right. Because they do this with...
Taking the themes.
They do this with politicians. They have them like, oh yeah, everybody's seeing this movie. You should go, like Bob Dole had to go see Independence Day. And his summary was pre-written. But if they had Joe Biden, if someone tricked him into thinking, yeah, everybody's... I mean, a lot of people are watching Crimes of the Future, but if it was like even more of a sensation and they want the president's thoughts on Crimes of the Future, and then you just have a clip of Joe Biden talking about Crimes of the Future, and it would immediately...
Where do I get this chair?
It looks like it makes him so healthy.
Yeah, I was trouble digested at this age. You know?
The movie to show Joe Biden is by far Edward Scissorhands. I want to hear Joe Biden's opinions on Edward Scissorhands. I want to hear he's out there. He's got the clippers on him. They call him clippers. They call him snip hands. Hardworking man. His hair's too big. His hair's too big. He lives in a tower.
Oh, Edward was a bad boy.
He's a bad dude.
Yeah.
Didn't realize you can't take what you don't have. And that's what his problem was.
They locked him in a tower.
They had to set him straight, trimming all the bushes, showing up with the bushes, trimming them with his hands.
I'd love to do a little snippy snip with Helena Borham Kartok as myself.
Helena Barham Kartok. She's a beautiful gal. She's a duck on the river.
Yeah.
He has gone 2 for 2 in incredible. Now that I think about it, it wouldn't do anything. He's indestructible in terms. We thought Trump was, but it's gotten even worse.
He's like the Crimes of the Future man is for organs. He is for gaffes.
Right.
Yeah.
This week,
A perfect being.
He is. Have you guys seen these? There's one where he was talking with the teachers. Do you see this?
Yeah,
this?
Well, what you're describing isn't a gaffe. It's like a senile old man literally not knowing where he is. He's at some fucking conference for teachers or something. They're like,
Asks me,
Mr. President, thank you for coming down. And then he just like is spinning in circles. In front of like a full crowd, and they're like, "Give it up for the president!" And he looks so scared, and it's actually really sad.
but he says he's like, "We got a lot of work to do." I got to get the Southern out of it.
Yeah, no, you're veering off into
Hard to do.
We got a lot of work to do. I know you, or you got to wave at me. He just like stops and points at. We assume we don't know who it is. We don't
Somebody
see it.
who has to wave at him.
Yeah, and he's like, "You gotta wave at me. We go back a long way."
Is there anybody there, do you think? Because there's a few clips where he's talking to ghosts, where he turns around like he shakes a ghost's hand.
It could be.
This is a man who does not know where he is.
He says, "Yeah, we go back a long way." And then there's just a pause, and there's laughing, uncomfortable laughing, and he says, "She was 12, I was 30." And everybody just keeps laughing.
what the fuck?
I don't know what
the roast master.
No, he just admitted to a crime, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the charitable interpretation of that is.
He's riffing, man. He's riffing up there.
He's killing.
Yeah.
He is killing.
The thing is,
He was a punk. She did ballet.
I think, okay, now that maybe it was, it's the fact that we couldn't see the person. But let's say it was an old lady. I think that's what he was going for. It was an old lady.
Uh-huh.
She was 12 back when they,
and then he's an older
He's
man.
saying that's how old he is.
Yeah, he's saying like we worked together a long time. Maybe he's not talking about intercourse. He's just saying we worked together a long time ago. It was, so long ago. She was 12, but I'm still so old.
And here's the thing about Joe Biden. I think he is rarely talking about intercourse.
Yeah.
I think we kind of put that on him.
Right.
Yeah, he's a
He just
grandpa.
falls into it mistakenly.
He's just trying to talk about a guy he knew with scissors for hands.
Alex, how's your body?
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. It's Goddamn America. I'm a sickly, young-ish, frankly, middle-aged man. I got an endoscopy this week. I released a podcast, and I thought the best way to do that would be to put up pictures of me going under for surgery.
Yeah, put the microphone all the way down your throat. That way we can hear what's going on in your
Get
stomach.
my first reacts to stomach acid. No, okay, so because people keep messaging me with genuine concern, do not be concerned for me. Save your energies for things. I have early onset GERD for some reason. GERD, gastrointestinal fucking reflux disease. I get like more reflux than you should, and it's fucking me up. But I have a case called silent GERD where I don't know what's happening, and so I let it get really bad. And it's something that happens when you house too many huge hoagies and drink 40s every night, and it expands your stomach like a balloon, and then the little valve on top shoots acid into your throat. And so I had to go get that checked out, because usually this is a problem for people older than me, and also because I can't feel it. I don't know if I'm like actually dying, but I went in there and they said I was fine.
So you have silent acid reflux. You can't feel it, but it's just eating away at the inside of your head.
You know how you'll eat a food? You'll eat like fried chitlins. What's it?
Oh, I
What's the
know.
Jake Flores food of choice?
Oh, I eat all sorts of shit like that. My mom's a Southern lady.
Yeah, you.
Chicken livers and shit.
Yeah, but burrito fried chicken finger liver.
I made menudo last week.
What's menudo?
It's made from tripe, dude.
Oh, bro.
Yeah, it's for like hangovers.
I had this Mexican thing. This is something I did while I was having these symptoms, which is why this happens to me. I got this thing at a Mexican restaurant called like, I forget what it was called. It's the word for the pot, and they bring you a big like cauldron of meat
Wow.
in a spicy red sauce.
And you ate the pot.
Why is it every restaurant or bar you're at, you always get a big bowl of something?
So I'm
You bought a
trying-
watermelon once
yeah, I go.
of tequila. A watermelon filled with
I like trying new flavors, and so I'm always pushing boundaries, and that's why I'm dying at 31. Yeah, and so what were we talking about?
Your body.
endoscopies. And I'm not trying to. Yours sounds much worse. But remember, like a year and a half ago, I was still living in D.C. and I had a full-time job, so I would make ribs every week.
Yeah.
And that ended up having some consequences. But I thought I had swallowed a bone. So I had to go to the hospital.
Oh, I remember when this happened.
I hate to say this, but we've talked about this on the show before.
Right, but I didn't. But I figured out since then that it wasn't a bone. It was it was just too much like fat.
Incredible.
Fatty.
Yeah. And you also have, you can't have milk or cheese, which would be a death sentence for me. I'd be done for. I haven't been able to have coffee for a few weeks. I'm having one now, but that's because I record like 7 podcasts a week, and it's just frankly you got to fill the tank
I don't
sometimes.
know how you would do that without.
It's been hard, just getting real sleepy with it. But anyway, so I went in for this very basic procedure, but it's also invited me into the wonders of the American healthcare system. Folks, which we all know and love, and we're kind of talking about today a little bit. Isn't that right?
Has it been fun dealing with the healthcare system?
Okay, there's a long story here in my back and forth to go get a very basic operation where I am on what is known as Medicaid. Are you familiar?
You're here.
Yes, the thing they put you on when you don't make enough money for your job to keep you alive.
Yeah, I got it.
I had an incident a few years ago where me and my wife together were making too much money to be on Medicaid, but also not enough money to really like buy any kind of health insurance. So I was
sweet spot, as it's called.
I was just too poor to live, but too rich to be on Medicaid.
Yeah, too rich to die.
That's how it was, baby. And so I've had the same doctor for like 5 years who is, and I don't think he's going to hear this, so I'm going to say this, a quack I use to get Adderall from.
What if he listens to the show?
I'll be, that was a joke. It's a comedy show.
If there are doctors who listen to this, there's like a 9 out of 10 chance they're quacks, but.
Right. Well, and by that, I mean, every time I went to see this man, there's an old Jewish man on 14th Street. He has a private practice.
Oh, my new Patreon. Oh, I'm not going to do the accent. It's going to do him getting the Patreon episode and getting excited.
He works alone in an office with, he's had an old woman, and every time I come in, I check in with the woman, and then she screams at him down the hall about like, I can't live like this anymore. And he's like, just check them in. Your job is to check them in.
Leave me alone. I'm checking the Discord.
And so he's like serving 10 patients as fast as he can because he works private practice to make like as much money as he can possible. So like I'll usually see him and he'll be like, what's wrong with you? And I'll be like, my head hurts. And he'll be like, yeah, get out of here. And then give me whatever I ask for. He, as of last year, fired this woman he's been fighting with his entire life. And I know that because it became impossible to contact him. I've been trying to...
She was holding it all together.
Well, she does all of his paperwork because he's seeing 100 patients a day. So he doesn't like, I think he can do them, but like knows he'll like save time if he just doesn't. So he doesn't answer his phone. And so I haven't been able to call and go to the doctor because I've been having this problem for like 5 years. I just didn't know what it was. And so I keep going and being like, I have sores in my throat. And they're like, weird. And so I have been calling for 6 months and no one's picked up. And I finally figured out I can still get an appointment on ZocDoc. So I showed up and was like, you didn't flee the state. You're still here. And he's like, yep, I've been here. And I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I got rid of her. We had to get rid of her. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And he was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I think I have cancer or something. And he's like, weird. And then he's like, what do you want from me? And I was like, I just need a referral because the insurance won't cover any visits without a referral. So I got him to write on a piece of paper. They wanted an electronic referral, and he gave me like a doctor's note, like you used to get out of school, like just like a signature and then like a tummy drawing on it with a sad face.
Wow.
And he was like, give this to them. And I was like, I think they want something on the computer. And he's like, no, they'll take this.
Did the tummy have abs on it?
Yeah, it looked really hot. It was a really sexual tummy.
That'd be weirder.
And so I went to the gastro, which is who looks at your tummy when you've had too many hoagies and you've hurt yourself. And I went in and I was like, I've hurt myself. And they were like, oh, wow. Well, where's your referral? And I was like, it's right here. And they're like, we don't take that. And I was like, great. And so I paid out of pocket to see that doctor, and they were like, you can probably get insurance to pay you back later. And I was like, well, I know you're covered, so I'll get them to pay me back. And then whatever this doctor says, since he's covered by the insurance, will surely cover whatever procedure he wants to do. And then I saw him, and he was like, yeah, get a procedure. And then they were like, you got to get your primary care doctor to sign off on the procedure. This is what the healthcare system is like in the United States.
Yeah, I'm lost. What the fuck are you talking about?
It's like having a petition.
This is so much.
There's like 3 clerical boundaries between me getting like a camera jammed down my mouth.
Just put it in me.
It's like
I have no gag reflex. I've been practicing at home.
It's just really basic stuff, and they can't get it done. And so I've spent all week on the phone with like 3 offices where I got the doctor who does not answer the phone to call me by emailing and then finding his cell phone, and then he emailed me back that he sent a reference, and it turns out the insurance doesn't accept his reference at all because he's listed as a specialist and not a primary care doctor. So he's like not even supposed to be there, and he's like, yeah, they don't pay me. I've been seeing you for free for years. And I was like, what? And so like that opened up a whole other bag of worms.
What the fuck? Why?
I guess he just felt bad for me or something. I was just like, that's very kind of him to see the Medicaid people when he's on paid. But
Isn't this the guy that you just called a quack, though?
yeah.
But you think he's crazy? He's like...
He's actually a hero. He's an everyday hero, and we don't deserve him. And
Hero with meat and cheese.
he's been giving me the Adderall I need because I can't have coffee now. And then, I eventually did so many phone calls, they let me get knocked unconscious and looked in my body. And that's been my week.
Well, what organs did they pull out of you? I mean, what did they...
They took a bunch of biopsies, so they took chunks of like my throat and my esophagus and my tum-tum.
Are you like, is anything happening to you?
Well, here's the thing when you go to the doctors, and this is again part of like the relationship between insurance and then like a bunch of private actors who don't communicate with each other, is they give all of this data to me. So they took blood work from me and then just gave me the data, and there's like some black numbers on there and then some red numbers. And I'm like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah, what is that? I know, like, if you owe money, you're in the red, and if you have...
Red is
like
bad,
money
right?
For your blood?
I've received no
You
new
owe blood
information
cells?
on this since they gave me the paperwork. I just know I have some red numbers and some black numbers, and that can't be good.
That's scary, man.
And then I went and I got the surgery, and they gave me the pictures of what my insides look like, and I'm like, what am I looking for?
That's cool. Are they cool looking?
Here's my verdict, and that is the stomach looks like a brain.
Yeah.
It's got wrinkles in it like a brain does.
the brain of the guts.
Yeah, because they sent me like, all right, your throat looks like a tube. I'm like, that looks like a tube. That check. Throat, tube. And then they got to the stomach, and I was like, well, this looks like a crinkly bag. And so I had to look up, like, is that what they look like, or am I like dying?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, okay, I think that's just what they look like. But also, I'm not a doctor, so maybe it is bad.
It's cool that they give you the pictures. You just go home and...
I actually really liked that part.
Yeah.
I saw. I went to go get lunch at my old work after getting out of the hospital because I was right next door and I liked their food. And my manager, who's from India, still works there, and he's like, they knocked me out for that in India. Or I got an endoscopy, but they didn't give me anesthesia. So I was just on the table, and they jammed a camera down my throat.
That's why I asked, because somebody told me that that's like the only way they can do it, because you'll choke if they put you under. But they might have just been like their doctor lied to them, and then they just passed on the information to me.
I don't think it hurts. It probably just feels like you're like eating a whole snake. Or something.
But did they put you under?
Yeah.
Oh, so I heard. Sorry, this is just some medical knowledge I picked up on the street. Like, I didn't know this was true. I just heard they have to fucking shove it down your throat while you're awake, because if they knock you out, you could choke on it. So somebody I know got one, and then they were just like, yeah. So basically, I just laid there like a fish on my side and was like, wow, like the whole time.
That is not true, and I do not know why they did that.
I watched a video of it on YouTube, and it gave me nightmares. I was like, I'm gonna have to do this someday, and they just spit roast you, and you're just like,
no, it's so easy.
Was he being used in a Cronenberg movie against his knowledge?
Yeah, maybe. Body's reality, baby.
They're putting organs in.
I think the story I remember, this is like something from fucking a million years ago. I can remember like a comic telling me or something. They were like, the guy was so homophobic he didn't want to get a colonoscopy because he didn't want anything to go in his butt. So he was just like, just shove it in my throat. And then the doctor's like, we can't put you under if we do it like this. And he's like, it's fine. So then he's just like getting this camera just shoved down his throat. And he's just like, whoa, not gay.
You know how long the intestines are? They're like 30 feet long. Camera's taking like a road trip through your body.
Right.
My buddy, comedian Marty Litwalk, he had injured his middle finger, and they had to, check it out. And he has an X-ray now of his middle finger. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's what's up.
Damn.
I wish I injured my middle finger instead of hurting myself through too many tasty beers.
Yeah, dude. That sucks. How's your physical corporeal being, Anders?
I don't want to jinx anything.
Anders,
What are your ailments, Anders? Say it on the health podcast.
I do have to go back to Northern Virginia every few months because I have this guy, which I lost.
Anders is showing us a retainer.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's like technically an appliance.
And by the way, a quick anecdote. When I was podcasting with Anders and Jake a month ago, I opened my mouth and was like, does this look normal to you? And then they both screamed.
Yeah, dude.
And it wasn't because anything was wrong. It was just because they saw my tonsils and they'd never seen tonsils before.
It's always weird to me when someone looks like a cartoon cat. When
Can
they
I see
open
him
their
again?
mouth.
Are you going to scream again? Because
Yes.
it made me feel othered.
I'll do it off
Please.
mic.
Okay, I'm going to do it right now.
Ah!
Yeah, I mean, you just have everybody has that little raindrop thing.
No, not everyone.
Really?
Most people get tonsillectomies, so most people don't look like a Looney Tune. Like
I'd like to see the numbers on that. I'd like to see the most people numbers, please.
I mean, I can do
Do I have
this.
it?
I can make a really,
Let me get the flashlight back up.
I can make a really gross noise.
Wow, looking normal in there, Jake. Looking good.
No hangy thing?
If I went into a doctor and I just started going,
Yeah.
do you think they could give me something?
Another case of the ring. He's got the grudge.
This was actually the biggest hit that I had in clown school. Was
Somebody's going to hate that noise. I'm
sorry.
You just keep
if
doing
anybody
it.
has, yeah, I can do it.
I have a feeling this entire segment has been making someone throw up.
I understand that my whole story was very confusing, but that's my point, is that it sucks getting any kind of service in this goddamn country.
Yeah, I mean, the American healthcare system is a Kafkaesque nightmare to the extent that it's the only thing that almost caused class consciousness in this country.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just that you could die at any time for no reason. And owe $1 million to the bank while it's happening.
It is so bad. Yeah, I have insurance just so to not go to the doctor.
What does that mean?
I've given up trying to get stuff fixed. So I just have the bare absolute minimum, and then
That's why you're
Like a
in
lot of
peak
Americans.
physical shape right now.
I don't want to know.
As a
I
life
don't want to go
insurance.
and get checked out. I don't know want to know what the problems are. I'm probably fine.
What are your ailments? Tell us your ailments.
Yeah, we'll just do it for you.
Oh God. Okay. I have. Well, this thing I paid when I had better insurance in DC. I finally got my jaw fixed with these retainer things.
Sure.
And if I don't do that, then it's going to be like permanent fucking.
You got like an expander?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I don't do that, then I'm fucked. But I had like such a brief window of having the right insurance, and now I don't have the insurance anymore. But I already paid for it, so
Right.
I have to go all the way back to Northern Virginia every few months to get the thing adjusted.
What?
Yeah.
You have to go to Virginia to do this?
Yep. That's where my
Okay.
doctor was.
Oh,
Because I was living in D.C.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you have to do is find a semi-illegal old man in Manhattan who will just do whatever you ask of him.
Right. Because and that's the thing about orthodontics is that everything they fix, like there was a tooth out of alignment when I was 16, And it was a huge deal. My mom got a new rung of insurance. She's like, "You're getting braces," and I'm like, "Could we not have done this 5 years ago?" Because I was like a junior in high school, and the tooth got fixed, but then it messed up something else, and then that messed up another thing, and it's like every little thing you move in your jaw, it fucks up 7 more things.
I mean, now if you do it right the first time.
I guess, in theory.
I know a lot of people who got orthodontistry and that was it. They just
Really?
got the one thing.
Those lucky bastards.
Those lucky bastards.
I mean, it was probably my fault for not wearing the plans correctly for several years, but
And we're going to get into the personal blame part of medicine soon in this interview. But also, I do think you did something wrong and it's your fault. And that's why the culture is toxic.
yeah,
Yeah.
Is that I see it that way.
it all comes back to me. People are going to be so triggered if they have like serious issues and they're hearing about us.
I think we can only do this segment because no one is that sick. You know what I mean? Like it would be very sad if it went the other way.
If one of us was like legit, like fucked up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like
Yeah, but you're a comedian. You get to make jokes about it if you're...
Oh, yeah, and you'd have them ready if it was like a whole thing for you.
Every comedian gets cancer and they do like the cancer special or whatever. But like you got to do like the Tig Notaro I have GERD special.
When I was going in for the thing, I was like, if I have cancer, will they give me a special? Because I'll have to produce and work a lot harder at stand-up than I've been doing.
Yeah, dude.
I've been all in the podcast zone. I'm not ready for a special.
It'll be inspiring. You'll do Marin and stuff.
Yeah, I want to inspire more than I do now.
I've been thinking about doing a one-man show about restless leg syndrome.
Yeah.
That would be heroic.
Right.
Someone's got to take on that.
There's no shows about that in Edinburgh.
Restless. A Lee story.
All of your shows should be called a Lee story.
Yeah, I don't know why I said just your last name. That's not really a thing.
Lead joints or things.
Jake, you were just in the
My Uncle
Olympics.
Spike.
I was in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Huh?
With your incredible body. What are some complaints you have?
Oh, I don't have any. I'm like a perfect specimen.
That's
of
really impressive.
Physical health. Yeah. That's weird. The doctor is like, go in there and he's confused. He's like, we've never seen this before.
I thought for sure you'd have like a reflux story because you're always doing this.
Oh, I'm like just constantly. There's something wrong with my body. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I have like really fucked up throat stuff. I don't.
You need smoking stuff.
Smoking's probably not helping. Can I do what?
Yeah, you made it. Can you do that? The question is, can you do that?
I can, but won't. Well, I think I did. No, man, I got that sleep apnea machine.
Unlistenable.
I have to just fucking blast humidified air into my nose and mouth all night in order to like not build a pulmonary disease slowly every night.
When did that start?
I've had it forever, man. I don't know if I've ever talked about it on this show. It's fucked up. Like I knew I had it like 10 years ago or something because like everyone in my family has this insane snoring.
My dad has it.
And like you'd sleep next to somebody and then they would just like take a video of you and show you in the morning and be like, you're dying like every 30 seconds. Like,
I literally couldn't sleep in the same room as my dad if we would like, go on a trip or something. Like it was impossible to fall asleep.
It's insane. It's like the loudest thing ever. It's not just snoring. It's
Was
like
it like night terrors?
No, it's you're choking. So
Yeah.
what happens is like your palate doesn't sit right when you're like asleep. So
Yeah.
you're unconscious. So you can't like adjust it consciously. So it sinks back. And then like if it sinks back far enough when you're doing honk shoe,
Honk honk shoe.
honk honk shoe, honk shoe time. You honk when you honk, it just
It all
seals
goes
up.
wrong.
So what happens is your brain needs REM sleep, which
Yes.
is like when your brain goes into maintenance mode, basically, and you get about 5-ish cycles of that a night, if I remember from fucking psychology school.
This was
But,
Ben
like,
Franklin's whole thing. Was he would just get the REM sleep.
I get. Was that a thing he did?
Yeah, he would take like 10 short naps and never sleep.
God.
Yeah, there's just people that have like experimented with like not sleeping normally. I forgot what it's called.
Which, by the way, you definitely don't need that other part your body also does.
Right.
You've definitely cracked the code.
Yeah, normal human being, notorious Ben Franklin. All of his hair fell out and he looked insane. Cool. Looks like a human owl. Take
I thought
advice
that was
from
just
that
male
guy.
pattern baldness.
No, it's because he didn't sleep right.
Was it
You're
not
gonna-
lightning?
Why are you, as a man, trusting a bald individual?
I don't trust him. I don't trust him. So but like what happens is like you need REM sleep, right? But if you have sleep apnea, you fall as soon as you fall asleep proper, you start to choke, and it interrupts the cycle of the REM thing. So you never get a full REM cycle, and you need to get like 5 or 7 like to properly feel rested.
Oh,
You just have one that tries to start over and over and over again, and you never get it. Plus, you're not getting oxygen because you're like die, and then you go like that, and then you wake back up. It's like really bad for you. So you like spend 8 hours like feeling worse instead of better. And if you have, so I figured this out, but I like didn't have. You can't just go to the doctor and be like, I have this thing. You have to go through all this fucking
At night, it's like I'm coming out of a pool for 8 hours.
Yeah, and like, if you don't fix it, like, you just have a stroke. Like, it just leads to pulmonary disease. People get fatter, you get unhealthy. Your lifespan just, you could track, like, oh, I'm going to lose 10 years off my life if I don't fix this thing. But you have to go fucking see. I literally went to some weird Jewish guy in Greenpoint who was just like, you're too skinny. And then he looked at my throat. He was like, wow, you got a fat man's throat. And then
Skinny with a fat man's throat.
well, then it took
The ideal body.
it took years of like getting my insurance consistent enough to stay like the same insurance while it went through like I had to go sleep in a laboratory. It was disgusting. The place that I slept and had the wires hooked up to me and stuff, 1 star on Google Maps. I don't know why it was rated.
Why is it? So that's like when they rate like the Statue of Liberty on Google.
Yeah.
There were probably like better, like higher class ones, right? That are more expensive.
I don't probably, but the thing is like I had Medicaid or whatever.
Yeah.
So they were like, you get this one.
Right.
And
Well, yeah, but that's why that one got 1 star.
1 star. They did experiments on me for 15 years. I was raised with blinders like Mewtwo.
I went through this whole thing, and then when you finally prove to them that you have sleep apnea after you do a take-home test and you go sleep in the laboratory, they give you a sleep apnea machine or a CPAP machine. It's called a Philips Dream Station 2 is the one I have.
Oh yeah,
Which is you can play.
there are a lot of good games on Dream Station too.
It's insane that it's called that, but it comes with a microchip inside of it. And the microchip tracks whether you use it every night. And if you don't use it every night for the first like few months, they repossess it because they've decided that you've been like irresponsible and aren't using the machine that they paid for enough. And then you have to do the whole fucking thing all over again. I did it. So like eventually they go, okay, you just have the machine. But that's like insane insurance, like austerity shit,
Yeah.
And then I do that every night.
It's to hedge bets against the people getting a Dream Station 2 just to beat the system.
Well, otherwise,
so they can flip it.
You saw what happened on Black Friday. Everyone was beating down the doors to Circuit City to get their games, Philips Dream Station 2.
People getting shot in the checkout line for their Dream Station 2s.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if it's the one like the one my old man has, it's kind of like a Darth Vader noise.
Yeah, I mean,
do
dude, it looks like in Dragon Ball Z when they're in like the water tank between fighting. You have that thing over your face, and it's just
Yeah.
all night.
Goku had many dreams in the Dream Station 2.
Well, he had sleep apnea,
But does yours need distilled water?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my dad. He always has to go out and find distilled water, and every grocery store is like, "What the fuck are you?"
The Dream Station only works in a frictionless environment, Vanders.
I kind of think that might be bullshit. Like I'm like
Really?
looking into it right now. I think it might be like a liability thing. Like if you don't use distilled water, like if you use distilled water, if you use other than distilled water, it might violate your ability to like say that the machine fucked up or something. I'm not sure because I use Poland Springs, which is like question mark.
Well, I don't think you should use the water in the sink here.
I'm definitely not using this.
Don't use the glue water. It
has to be.
in your dream machine.
It has to be New York City tap water.
No.
Eric Adams approved.
Did you become a pizza overnight? Yeah.
Oh man! But then that did fix it for you.
You know why the dreams are better in New York? It's because of the water.
Because of the water. That's how they made all the rap songs.
Yeah, man, I feel better every night that I use it. I mean, sometimes I come home and I'm just exhausted and I forget to, and then I wake up and I feel like shit. I'm like, oh, right, I have to do this every night of my life or else I'll feel bad forever and then have a stroke and die 10 years early.
I do think you're one of the best people I know at not getting sleep.
Yeah, I sleep pretty erratically.
You're like a Buddhist monk that way. They kept you awake for 3 days to prepare you for your life of wantlessness.
I'm kind of like Ben Franklin, people say.
Yeah. You're like the new Ben Franklin with hair. With more hair than he ever had.
Yeah, new and improved.
He never had a beard.
Yeah.
They would never put Ben Franklin on an Eve 6 album.
Oh, that's right. The
Just
album
you
came
watch.
out yesterday. Go
Yeah.
get it, everyone. Get vinyl of me.
Until I saw it, I really could not wrap my mind around Jake being on an album cover, and it has changed the world since then.
Well, like a big one too, you know. I mean, there's like dumb, like our friend's band made a,
Yeah.
but like
No, but this is like an international record release.
it'd be in like every hot topic. Just a picture of me.
I'm interested to see how it ties into the themes. I haven't listened yet. The
pretty
themes
good.
of like having a cool T-shirt.
I listened to
I
it
can't sleep at night.
last night when I was bartending. When everyone left the bar, I just played it alone. It was really good though.
Yeah, Mr. Darkside been pumping that tune.
Yeah, they found a real like power poppy place. that they live.
Shout
It's cool.
out. Eve 6, shout out. Shout out.
Hello, Max, if you're listening. The album's good.
Good album.
Album cover's even better though. People are saying.
Oh, we had another thing that we were going to talk about. Maybe we can save that after. I know I'm just like
Should we get into
behind the curtain here. Let's do the interview now.
Let's get into the interview. If you have not picked up yet on what we're talking about today, it's health.
You're too dumb to understand the following conversation that's about to happen.
We're going to interview Alex's illegal doctor.
Let's play that now.
No, I'm just kidding. Co-author of the new book, Health Communism, out on Verso Books. She wrote along with Artie Virkant. We were going to interview Beatrice Adler-Bolton about this new book. All right, here we go. Interview time. Okay, we are now joined by co-author of Health Communism and podcaster from Death Panel, Beatrice Adler-Bolton. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about the book. I read a little bit of it, get a chance to finish it, but I think I get the gist of what's going on here. Can you help us with some basic concepts as we dive into this concept? Health communism. First off, what is health, I guess? That seems to be where you start with the book.
Can I ask a follow-up question that we've somewhat covered on this show, which is there any overlap with health goth?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
important.
Definitely lots of overlap with health goth.
Interesting.
Deleuze was kind of a health
sure.
goth.
But I think not the kind of health goth of like thinking of someone like in Nike, like head to toe in an annoying Lower East Side bar, more like goth in a hospital, health goth kind
Yeah,
of thing.
like you're dying.
The
yeah.
gothest kind.
Like Mia Goth.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, health, right? Like we think about health as kind of like a personal characteristic, like a thing that individuals have, like whether you're a healthy person or not a healthy person, whether you have a disease or not, or whatever, you know, whether you're mentally healthy or you're quote unquote, you know, abnormal in some capacity. But the fact of the matter is that, and what we're essentially arguing in the book is that idea of healthcare and health as a kind of intrinsic personal quality, that's just a bunch of bullshit. And that essentially health is determined by so many other things that you really have no control over. Like, so can you really tell someone, you know, that they're unhealthy, right? Like if it's their job that's making them sick. But under capitalism and the way we do things, particularly in the United States, it's someone's fault if they're sick, and it has everything to do with a kind of personal destiny. But the truth is that kind of idea that exists only in a way to just be advantageous towards the commodification of healthcare. It doesn't actually describe what it's like to be a person that lives under the kind of extractive labor conditions, the kind of environments that we live in. For example, our housing, you know, the price of housing affects what your health is going to be. So part of what we're trying to show in this book and what we're really arguing is that we should be thinking of health as a kind of collective thing, as a thing that, you know, within the kind of professional public health like framework, people would maybe call like the social determinants of health, which is, the kind of political, social, and structural things that have way more power over, what your life is going to be like, and whether or not you're going to live a long life or a short one, a comfortable one or a brutal one. But that part of the thing that's really important about capitalism is hiding the idea that health is a population level thing that we're all responsible for, and placing it instead on the individual, because it's conducive to labor discipline towards keeping us divided, keeping us, with the boot on our neck, so to speak. So what we're trying to do in this is really challenge people to think about their health differently, politically, but also as part of a larger whole, and to not assume that maybe because you don't have a diagnosis of some kind that you're quote unquote healthy. There is really no such thing as health under capitalism.
Yeah, that's what I liked about your book, is because that's why it's always popped out at me as like a weird absurdity whenever people talk about health or like mental health or whatever. This abstract idea of normal seems to be just implied, but no one can ever really define it or pin it down. It's just something people just go, what? It's just when you're not sick or whatever. And it's just like a bizarre thing.
Anecdotally, I've found that the personal approach to health that we have now has led to the sickest people I know having the most disdain for doctors that I've seen. Like, the people who have to go regularly are like, this guy hates me.
Are you talking about yourself, Alex?
I am not.
All right. I know where you've been.
Yeah, that's a common experience. Definitely, for sure.
So we use some Marxist terminology and like analysis here to get into how the definition of health and the social determinants of it sort of center around this group of the population known as the surplus population. Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. Here's the thing, right? Like, the surplus population is an old idea. And it's important to understand that we're using it a little bit differently. The surplus population is something that's even like written into Marx. But in the old days, this used to basically just describe people who were unemployed, kind of waiting in the wings to be thrown back into employment. It's people who are, thought of as a burden rather than a kind of productive, maybe tax-paying person, for example. But, fundamentally, the surplus class in our contemporary era encompasses so many more people than people who are unemployed. And it encompasses people who are chronically ill, people who are disabled, people who are gig workers, people who work in non-traditional industries, like within like creative fields, like who are comedians or who are artists or art handlers, or people, the kinds of people who are working, in industries where you're supposed to be paid an exposure and never given benefits, like, and, for your entire career.
Just
those kinds of
realizing I'm
frameworks.
surplus as I hear this. Do you guys know we're surplus?
I think I might be a surplus.
Yeah, you guys definitely are.
I feel more essential than ever.
Part of it is that, the surplus is really important to capitalism. It's kind of thought of as this group of people who are disposable, right? Who are maybe not like worth the kind of investment that would be needed to support the surplus, like a robust, like welfare state. Like, imagine if we gave everybody full health coverage. That would really change the amount of leverage that non-surplus workers would have, right? Like, if we think about so much of our union organizing, like fights for healthcare, they happen at this really small level because they often happen within the individual workplace. So part of what we're trying to kind of construct here, right, is that we're so used to on the left thinking about things in terms of like workers, right? Like, everything's oriented towards, I think, a model of thinking through the identity of the worker as a kind of cleavage point or a point for initiating solidarity or action. And that leaves a lot of people out who are not, considered traditional workers, maybe people who work in the home or who work under the table or who work in the service industry, right? These are like very different kinds of modes of being that don't have the same kind of leverage. But the precarity of people like us in the surplus class, like that's really necessary because it's important leverage to have the precarity there basically as a threat. If under capitalism, the idea that everyone could be a billionaire is the carrot, the surplus class is the stick. It's the punitive, it's the punishing side of it. It's the side that's cruel, that treats people basically as worth only, what they can sort of prove to workers about why it's better to sort of stay in your shitty job under shitty working conditions than be unemployed, then be disabled, then be out of a job, then be out of the sort of traditional workforce. And, I think so much harm can be done just through the denial of solidarity between workers and non-workers or traditional laborers and people who are sort of operating on the margins. And really what we're saying here is like, if we want to do anything to fuck with capitalism, like we're going to have to move past this kind of worker, non-worker division. And the surplus class, is an idea that's like hoping to try and encompass everyone, because even if you're non-surplus now, the fact of the matter is that your labor conditions are shaped by the fact that you could become surplus at any moment. So
oh no,
the threat, in and of itself, like that is a huge, if not the most important component of labor discipline.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting fleshing out of the surplus population idea because, if you want to be really orthodox Marxist about it or whatever, the idea here is that there's a bunch of people who are going to be unemployed, and having that as a constant counterweight, the employer, the capitalist, can always negotiate down wages, because if you have a bunch of people who really, really want to work for you, no one is going to be able to demand a higher wage. And then you've got this weird liminal outer bubble thing at all times that keeps everything in place. And that has to do strictly, when you read Marx, with the dynamics of labor and just people needing money to stay alive or whatever. But when you put it in terms of health, it's the same thing to some extent. It's just maybe less focused on the dollars and cents of it. But also another thing about needing to work is that you first and foremost do it so that you can fuel your body and stay alive. And I always think about this when you talk to libertarians or whatever, who will say, what, you're free, you can do whatever you want. What do you mean? If you work for someone, you're choosing to work for them, and you go, I live in a body and it demands food all the time. That's why I work at a Target, and the McDonald's inside of the Target, it's not because I want to be there, it's because you have to keep fueling this fucking thing. So that puts you in the liminal space the same way that the labor argument argues that you're there.
Well, if there's something in the book that I found really interesting, that you write about how the surplus population or class actually does produce a lot of capital through this analysis by Marta Russell, I believe her name was. She's late, but can you talk about that? Explain how they extract money out of the surplus through, finding cures for things and nonprofits and et cetera.
Absolutely. And I guess quickly, just to roll back to what Jake said real quick though, the idea of having to, work to fuel your body is definitely true, but the inverse is also true, that so much of our healthcare is about making sure that we can show up to work or look appropriate at work, for example. So, it's a kind of circuitous, two-sided thing. A very shitty snake eating its own tail. The health side of it and the labor, they're always connected. And, I think this is really, that's what underlies the money model of disability, which is Marta Russell's idea. She was someone who was writing and working at a time where Marxist critiques were not welcome in the disability community. They're still pretty unwelcome, I'd say. her biggest thing that she's probably most well known for is this idea of the money model, but it's also, you know, a critique of the Americans with Disabilities Act from the left. And this was something that she started arguing right after that law passed. So, you know, it was pretty unwelcome. These kinds of ideas are things that you won't necessarily find in a lot of other things about disability. But the idea is basically that, you know, even people who are deemed unproductive, like a non-worker, that person's body creates jobs and creates a whole economy around it, right? Like if you think about, like, for example, like I'm disabled, I'm chronically ill, I've got like a ton of shit wrong with me, right? Like if I even wanted to start listing it, it would be exhausting and pointless. But every single thing that I have to do to maintain my health, right? Like that's someone's job to provide that service. And beyond that, you know, for people who are not like me, who like get to live in the community, people who live in nursing homes, and it's not just old people, it's young people like us too, disabled people who still like live their entire lives in warehoused like institutional facilities or psych hospitals and stuff like that. You know, when you're looking at that kind of economy of scale, what happens is the person becomes more valuable, not as the patient or as the body even, but just the body in the bed taking up space. Because what happens, for example, in nursing homes is that, say, you've got a nursing home that's got like 1,500 beds. For each bed that is full, the federal government's going to pay, you know, a certain amount of money, whether that's through Medicare, whether that's coming through Medicaid, whatever. You know, there's money that is sort of state money that's attached to that process. And then it's up to the company or the private equity firm running the nursing home to try and make a profit from that. And it's similar to the ways that you think or hear about, like, for example, how much money prisons are given per day per prisoner, and then how they try and like make a profit by reducing like the amount that they're spending on food down to like 10 cents per prisoner per day, and anything that they can squeeze out becomes a kind of a surplus profit in the way that we think of our labor generating surplus profit, but it's generated around the body that's being serviced or maintained or housed in some capacity. So, you know, this kind of idea of like, oh, well, you know, disabled people, they're just like unproductive, they're just a drain, they don't contribute to society. It's not very true if you're looking at things from a pure economic perspective. But the way that we talk about things, you know, we talk about the surplus class as not being an economically valuable or generative group of people. And I think trying to hide where the money comes from is a really important kind of way of pretending that the surplus class has no power and almost doesn't matter to capitalism. But if you look at the billions and billions of dollars that are moving like through all sorts of health infrastructure, whether that's like hospitals, pharmacies, motherfucking big pharma, like even just like your all of the wellness bullshit beyond that, doctors' offices, shit like that, you know, that entire relationship that each person has to all of the things that they rely upon for care, like that has this way of generating, you know, quote unquote value for the economy. But the way that we frame things, right, is that if you need this kind of care, if you need this kind of support, that you're a drain, that you are somehow, you know, creating problems economically and not, you know, just participating in like regular ass life, like acknowledging that there's no such thing as like a healthy person and a sick person, that we're all, you know, just in various sort of stages of needing like different types of care, and who is considered sick and who is considered healthy has so much to do with who has access to healthcare in the first place, that, you know, we're kind of in this situation where we've just created this huge lie about, you know, essentially a whole part of the population just not mattering, when they're really actually very central to how our entire like country thinks of like its wealth even, or its knowledge beyond the sort of like individual care relationship. I mean, in the United States, we take like the sort of healthcare industries and innovations so seriously as a kind of nationalistic product, and yet we treat the people whose bodies produce that as waste.
Yeah. Not sure entirely how related this is, but I just wanted to knock it out so I didn't forget. Can you describe this term extractive abandonment you use a lot in this book?
Yeah. So this is, sorry, I feel like I'm like just ranting at y'all, but basically,
That's
you
a
know,
podcast.
that's true, right?
The people paid for
This is us taking Marta Russell's idea, which is really looking at disabled people specifically and trying to knit it together with ideas that come from like the prison and police abolition movement, specifically. I don't know if y'all are familiar with like Ruth Wilson Gilmore's work. So her idea of organized abandonment is what we're riffing on here. And so what she talks about is how, you know, states basically use things like building up the prison industrial complex as a way of like funding all sorts of capacities of the state. And we do the exact same thing through healthcare. You know, we build the state through creating capacities for our healthcare system to harm people. As we were talking about, like just literally minutes ago, you know, it's a really common experience for people who need a lot of healthcare to feel like doctors treat them like total shit, right? Like, and so part of that has to do with doctors being individual bad actors, but part of that also has to do with the system that's designed to essentially produce the conditions in which doctors will be out of attention, out of time, out of patience, you know, out of options, even by the time you're the person walking into the exam room with them. So, you know, we can look at people as bad actors, like in a vacuum, but that's never going to like take us towards a kind of like political critique that challenges capitalism. That's just like calling out people for being shitty. And like people are going to be shitty regardless of like what political economic system we're under. So we could say like that we're only going to be free once everyone in the world is like perfect and not a bad person anymore. Or we could think about, you know, maybe what is it that we're doing that's putting together the kind of conditions where someone who's seeking care is so guaranteed to experience harm, abandonment, abuse. You know, part of it is that we're building these things this way. You know, we build prisons to fill them. We don't build them to just like look at them. So, you know, it's really kind of a way of trying to help people understand that like it's not just that like healthcare is profiting off of you. It's that like without profiting off of you, the state doesn't really have a lot of other ways of moving money around itself. You know, we don't fund shit anymore in the United States. We could fund like really robust federal social safety net protections, but then what incentive would there be to work for Uber if that were the case?
This is all not even covering health insurance, which is literally like a separate bloated organism just sitting on top of the healthcare industry, moving money around, almost like the same size.
Well,
Yeah.
it's described in the book as kind of a financial sector, right? Am I?
Yeah.
It's like a speculative, parasite.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, think of how much fucking time we wasted during like the last two election cycles debating whether or not like private insurance companies deserve to exist or not.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, imagine if we spent a fraction of the time debating like how much healthcare we all deserve.
You want to get into that, Anders?
Yeah. Well, one thing this made me think about is, you know, the way we categorize disability, and I was looking up, you know, which terminal diseases at a certain point you meet a threshold where some of them become disabilities, but then some others don't. And Jake was saying, you know, you get kicked out of your insurance if you have someone in your family member with certain diseases, and it's this kind of like arbitrary system. And it occurred to me recently that like I don't think of myself as disabled, but when I was diagnosed as a little kid with a bunch of different developmental and learning disabilities, but I don't think of myself that way because I can work. Like I'm in the surplus population now. If I needed to, which I kind of do, I could join the labor force.
Yeah, You could join the army.
I could. Well, I don't know if they would let me in.
They probably wouldn't let you in. They'd probably like tell you to fucking get the hell out of there.
Yeah,
because of their no clowns rule.
No, you'd be a super soldier. I believe in you.
I think you'd be really great at it. Anyway, what were you saying?
I mean, just like the way how much, I mean, we kind of went over this a little bit, but like how much does that, the ability to reproduce capital have to do with the designation disabled or non-disabled?
Yeah, I mean, it's so fucked up, right? Like, there are so many different ways of thinking about disability, and the way that we normally, I think, like the average person thinks about disability, that doesn't relate at all to how, like, you become legally certified as disabled or as someone who can qualify for Social Security disability insurance or SSDI, which is when you're like declared disabled by the federal government. They say, you know, you're never going to recover and, you know, we're going to put you on disability. You get Social Security, you get access to Medicare. There are also programs for certain people who can't qualify for SSDI called, for example, like supplemental security income. And that's at a state level. And the reasons why these like other programs exist is because to qualify for SSDI, you have to have worked a minimum amount of time to build up work credits before you can even apply to be disabled. So like if you don't pay into the system, let's say you are disabled as a child and when you're 18, like it's clear, like there's not a job that you can find that's going to accommodate your disabilities and figure shit out, and you decide to apply for SSDI. Well, if you haven't like paid into the system by paying employment taxes, you don't qualify to apply for SSDI. That those rights of being declared disabled at a federal level, like that's not something that you're entitled to. It's really, in a way, a safety net program that's designed only to support people who have already proven themselves as workers. And part of that's because this is a really conservative law. I mean, when we think about disability, people tend to think that it's like always liberal or whatever. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think of like disability activists? Like what political side of the spectrum do you think like most disability activists in the United States over history have been on?
Oh, I would put them all on liberal. Is that not the case?
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. I mean, the ADA was.
And Helen Keller seems like the prime example.
Helen Keller's like an exception for sure. You know, there are definitely like prominent, like liberal or even sometimes like leftist, like well-known disability figures. But actually, the majority of the disability rights movement in the United States for a very long time was dominated by libertarian ideology.
Really?
So, yeah. Yeah.
Isn't libertarians' whole thing, though, kind of like if you're disabled, we throw you into a trash compactor? Isn't that like the general thing they're working with?
Well, you would think so, right? But like the idea is the dignity of risk and that everybody deserves access to the dignity of risk. That was the argument they used to sell the ADA. I mean, like the idea was that disabled people are discriminated against by not being allowed to be workers. And they argued that, you know, like it was really fucked up because disabled people were made dependent on the state, a chance to be workers. And yeah, like things are really different now than they were then. And back then, if you were disabled, you likely lived like most of your life in a congregate institution. Like if you were diagnosed with a learning disability as a child, you probably would have lived your entire life in a hospital school. You know, and probably all of us now would have probably maybe been hanging out like in a fucking asylum for all we know if things had gone a little differently from 1950 to 1980. But
amazing podcast content would have come out of that.
So cool to hang out with you guys in the asylum all day.
The podcast asylum.
Right?
Well,
sorry.
Well, while we're on this topic, I mean, this is maybe a little bit out of left field, but it made me really curious reading this, and so I looked up like the percentage of disabled people in America who are employed. And it is now at 19%, but it was at, according to like official statistics, but that went up by like an entire percentage point, which is like a lot of people over the course of the past like 2.5 years. Do you have any insight into why that has happened since the advent of COVID?
Oh, definitely because of remote work accommodations, for sure. You know, like this is the kind of thing that like disabled people have been asking for a long time as an accommodation that most people, like their job would have denied it before. And like, for example, like the ADA is reactive, right? Like I don't have like ADA rights because I'm on SSDI and I've been declared a non-worker. But if I did have ADA rights, let's say I like worked at a bank and that bank was like, damn, you can't see anymore, Beatrice. Like, we're going to fire you because you can't tell the difference between a $5 bill and a $20 bill. I could sue them and I could take them to court and I could say that they, you know, basically fired me instead of offering me reasonable accommodations for not being able to tell the difference between money, for example. Like, that's the only way that you can exercise your rights under the ADA. It's not like I can be like, oh, don't fire me or else the ADA. Or I can be like, oh, the ADA says you have to do this. Basically, I can ask for something. A boss, an employer, a school, whatever, they can be like, fuck you, no. And then it's on me to spend the money and the time to take that person to court in order to exercise my rights. It's called like a reactive model. So,
like an Avengers situation.
Yeah, you know, everything's happening after the harm's already done. You know, after the person's already been excluded from whatever context they were in. And so really the way the ADA was sold, right? Like in Congress, on the floor of Congress, they were like, this is welfare reform. We're going to like reduce the amount of people who are on public supports. We're going to reduce the deficit. All these disabled people, they're going to get back to work, right? Like they're going to get to work. We're going to facilitate employment, like whatever. But of course, like when this law was being passed, they were really worried, you know, like we don't want to give people too much power over their boss. So like the way that it was constructed as a model of, you know, civil rights was basically made in order to come out favorably for the employer. And this is considered to be the gold standard of disability policy in the world. Everyone says like the US is the best when it comes to disability, and it's a fucking low bar. Let me tell you. I mean, it's and it's entirely because when this law was proposed, you know, the idea was that disabled people would be liberated by being enfranchised into capitalism. And I think if anything, you know, maybe in the last 30 years, some of us have learned how wrong that was, but that's still the spirit of the law, really. So, you know, if we think about things like how the pandemic maybe improves labor conditions for disabled people, it's only because the pandemic normalized some of the things that were perhaps in the past considered unreasonable accommodations, right? And like put it so that it finally was advantageous to the employer to like give people what they were asking for.
That's what you need, right? It's the big structural shock. They're not going to give up their fucking real estate scheme they've got going on, propping up all these offices full of people who absolutely could have worked at home for 20 years just for one special constituency. It has to be like a deadly virus sweeping the nation.
Yeah.
For everyone to, and they're trying to take it back now. Like they're trying to still make everybody go back in and do it. It's just the veil has been pierced in this way where like the cultural consensus on this is like, we all kind of know you don't have to go work at the Chase Bank anymore.
Yeah.
You could do this at your house.
Just have Eric Adams driving around going like, everyone needs to leave their home.
Yeah,
He wants to open the asylums again. If we're not careful, Eric Adams is going to have us all podcasting from upstate New York soon.
Oh boy.
The compromise is like, we'll send armed thugs to go make you do it. We know it doesn't make sense, so here's a good reason for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fucked up.
Yeah. Well, okay. So clearly we have a good picture here of like the ADA being this like.
Sorry, I got majorly in the weeds on that one.
No, the weeds is what we're here for. This is all very interesting. But I wanted to kind of bring it back around from that to right. That's where we're at. That ADA doesn't work. It's like clearly this libertarian modeled thing that's sides with the employer. This is all happening because of the mode of production that we currently live in and how horrible it is and everything. But what's the goal? What is health communism? Like, what's the where are we proposing a plan here in this book, or are we just laying out philosophically, how we got here?
Well, the book's not a plan for sure. I mean, I think
it'd have to be a big book.
It would have to be at least like a
Silmarillion at least.
Longer. But, the thing is that before we can even have a plan, we have to get on the same page. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about in the book are not things that are necessarily well known. I mean, there's a long history of health on the left being considered kind of like an intro topic, maybe like an on-ramp to left organizing in some way. But I think what we're really asking people to do is to start thinking a little bit differently about what role healthcare exactly plays in our lives. And part of the reason why I think there hasn't been any kind of moment, let's say in the last 200 years, where in the U.S. we've had a really robust critique of exactly how capital instrumentalizes health. It's because so often this is captured sort of within the realm of medical authority and expertise, right? So it's the kind of thing that, we tell people you can know, your experience as a patient or whatever, and that is your experience, but that's not knowledge, right? Medical knowledge is something that comes from a university and that is sort of sanctioned within that way. But, the truth is that I think patients know better than anyone else just exactly what the values and priorities that are orienting our healthcare system are. And so much of them are towards sorting workers from non-workers, taking people who, are maybe not as productive, trying to make them into more productive workers. And this is something that we all have to sort of consent to, but that, I think, we're in right now a system of production where one of the main forms of coercion is to be forced to submit to this. But it's not necessarily something that I think, unless you necessarily spend a lot of time trying to pull these threads, it's not something that's a huge conversation on the left. I mean, again, we had a very serious conversation about if we could afford to get rid of private insurance, amongst the alleged so-called, people who called themselves leftists in 2020. And that's the kind of conversation that Artie and I really don't think that we have time for, nor do we feel like there's really room for discussion in the left for whether or not we need to be nice to private insurance companies. And I think really this book is trying to be, I don't know, I hate using the word be a lens, but it's I want people to learn what got me to where I'm at now, and to be able to learn those same things and take it back to whatever they're doing. Cause the way that plan towards health communism happens is that health communism has to be the goal first. So if anything, this book is what health communism fucking isn't.
Right. Fair. Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of what jumped out at me when I was reading this. I thought was pretty interesting was you think about the last couple of election cycles and Medicare for all being this thing that was just the farthest imaginable thing beyond the pale for so many Americans. And it's barely a reform really on this concept. Mm-hmm. And how, but it was really radicalizing. It was a weird middle point that sort of led people into thinking, wait, if you can think about this way, maybe you can think about all these other aspects of society and go a little bit further into the pale and out into the outside of the realism that we live in and stuff like that. But the actually breaking down what health is and how it was constructed historically through capitalism and stuff like that. I don't know, that seems like an admirable goal for this book. I think it's really interesting. I really like that you talked about the idea of medical professionalism being this thing that like just works into this concept that people buy into. 'Cause I think about that a lot with psychology and psychiatry and stuff, because that's what I studied when I was in college a long time ago. And the experience I had like learning about how all of these antidepressants and stuff like that are currently like the gold standard, that are like things that everyone puts a lot of faith into, were just sort of thrown at a wall, come up with randomly and then sold. The thing that's always bothered me is the incredible amount of faith people have in just someone standing in a white lab coat and going, "Trust me, I'm holding a beaker. I've decided that your brain is broken and this pill fixes it. And now you are healthy." And that's that concept again of just like, wait, well, what is that? What is healthy? What is normal? I don't know. Like, that seems like it's all connected together in this idea. So I guess I didn't mean to ask you like what a plan is so much as what the state of health communism is, I guess. If communism is like the abolition of private property or something, along those lines, like what does health communism look like as opposed to where we're at right now?
Well, it's the abolition of health as an economy. It's the abolition of austerity models of care, and it's, I think, looking at care not as a tool of coercion. I mean, particularly talking about what you're talking about in the context of mental health care, psychiatry, biopsychiatry in particular. I think it's rejecting our very carceral approach to mental health care that paints people with mental health diagnoses as being some sort of fundamental, like ontological threat to the safety of society, to the normality of society. And I think we kind of treat these ideas right now as naturalized, as like totally normal, or kind of like the way things should be. I mean, a law of nature almost. And part of the reason that is, and I know that like using this word sometimes like riles people up, but like one of the reasons why we think that it's normal, right, for some sort of survival of the fittest system to exist is because of the American eugenics movement, and because of the ideas that they popularized, which were essentially that like we couldn't afford to give everyone all the care they needed, because if we did, it would threaten the survival of future society. So I think that kind of framework, taking that idea of like giving people the care they need, whether that's access to drugs that we currently criminalize, or access to care that we currently charge $300,000 a dose for, that essentially that the point of that care becomes oriented around improving the person's quality of life, making them feel like a person, and not towards either making them, quote unquote, more normal, safer, whatever, or a better, more productive worker. What our priorities are when we study drugs is influenced by capitalism. So, when we look at what drugs are effective mental health interventions, for example, you cannot separate what's considered effective from the values of what capitalism says, like, are the criteria of a good worker, right? Like someone who doesn't question authority, somebody who is willing to prioritize their boss over their family or their friends or whatever, or over their physical health, right? Like, and so these ideas that exist as kind of natural, like if anything, health communism is looking at those kinds of structures that oppress us and also, keep care locked within this profit model. And it's saying that those are not natural, but that those are functions and tools of power of the state. It's a much less, obvious kind of disciplinary tool than maybe the police, but it's still a really important way that the population is disciplined, and that also political dissent is kept in line, because the kind of thing like, fucking off to go like do mutual aid, right? Like if all of our healthcare was taken care of, we would be, I think, a lot more able to engage in projects in our free time. We wouldn't feel as beholden to the kinds of demands of our bosses. You know, so many sick people that I know, like, work in the shitty conditions that they do because their employer, like, that employer covers their plan, or their plan covers their medicine or whatever. And just the idea of switching is like so fucking stressful that they're like, whatever, I'm going to stay at this shitty job because switching is worse, right? So, like, if we think about Medicare for All, in one way, it's a tiny reform that only changes the payer. But at the end of the day, what it does is it gives everyone in the United States collective bargaining rights over their healthcare plan, right? And that's a fundamentally terrifying thing to the United States. That's a terrifying thing to people in power. They absolutely would never want to give workers that much power, let alone people who are not workers. You know, people who are not workers in the eyes of the U.S. state do not deserve shit. We are a country that's built around, you know, building up taxpayers as the kind of reified kind of archetype of like what we should all aspire to be. And health communism would be essentially saying, fuck all that. Like, we're orienting this towards other things, and that those ideas only exist because they have been built up through things like medical authority, through things like, you know, the socialization of medicine and the role that health plays in work, and being healthy plays in getting hired. I mean, just think of like how you get ready for like a job interview. You like brush your hair, you try and look better and healthier than you usually are to put on a good impression, right? Like, there's this kind of framework of, I think, health that exists as this biological fascist fantasy that, you know, really does underlie so many things, partially because it ties in so much to the values of racism and colonialism and empire. But, you know, at the end of the day, health communism is saying that those things are like decisions and not laws of nature.
Totally. I think we'll probably run out of time here a little bit. Anything else we should get into right before we bounce?
There's a lot, I don't want to get on my soapbox too, because I really appreciate the way you framed the madness chapter. Like,
I mean, I'd love to hear your soapbox, honestly.
Well, yeah,
We just have so many episodes on the soapbox already. They're really great. You got to check out the eugenics episode. That's an old classic.
yeah. Check out our
Oh, come on. We'll do like 5 minutes or something.
Okay. Well, yeah. What you're saying about like madness and the way this has been sort of, you know, this idea that everything is, I think, really redounds to is normality, and how we naturalize, you know, this the opposite of whatever thing we're trying to, you know, weed out of people or classify people as. And I feel like, and I get into some trouble with some people here, but like, you know, to make this the Anders Lee show. Well, I guess it is at this point, but I was diagnosed with autism as a little kid, but my question has always been, what is it? What is autism? And I still have yet to really hear a cogent answer other than like what it's not. And that the what it's not is always changing, because both of these things are always changing. And, you know, there's a tendency to want to like naturalize both of these things as like, it's like a trans-historical phenomenon, being autistic. There were, you know, autistic people hundreds of years ago is what a lot of people say, but it's, I think, historically contingent. And, you know, the heart of the matter, I think, is that there's no such thing as like a normal person cognitively, right?
No, definitely not. And you're absolutely right that historically, that pathology is just that. It's a diagnostic category, and the meaning changes from decade to decade and DSM to DSM. And, you know, the idea that I think a lot of us have, who are people who are labeled or who have diagnoses, so often is to sort of form groups and communities around our diagnostic categories, around these different taxonomies that we're given. And, I think that's where the idea of the surplus class becomes really important, because it offers a way to find that same kind of solidarity that is not using the master's tools. It's not using taxonomy in order to dictate who should be in solidarity with who else, right? And I think part of that is that, I consider myself disabled not because the state has certified me disabled. I think it would definitely be in spite of that, almost, because the amount of work required to get certified, right, and the kinds of things that go into who counts as being disabled and who doesn't, have nothing to do with what I politically believe to be a disabled identity under capitalism. So, if we think about pathology as destiny, right, then that starts to make us wonder about, I think, what the sort of meaning of different symptoms are. And what is more important is, do we have anything that can, I don't know, make symptoms feel better? And can taxonomy be used instead of labeling and separating people as a kind of shorthand for getting people access to services? Definitely. But as it exists now, it doesn't work that way. It's supposed to, but it works more as a way of marking people as different, marking them as non-valuable, keeping them out of certain places, keeping them into certain places, right? And so I think, a lot of these ideas of who we are based on what our diagnoses are, it's frustrating because a lot of those come also from insurance billing codes. What counts as autism is not necessarily intrinsically what is the autistic embodied experience of the world, but it's what counts as something insurance companies will recognize as either being a symptom of autism or something that could be done to, quote unquote, cure it or mitigate it or treat it, right? And so important in I think if you are someone who has one of these identities is if you're thinking of what health communism can do, it can give you a way of sort of embracing your identity as surplus without feeling like you're under the thumb of the pathology that's been imposed upon you by insurance billing regimes and the needs of the capitalist system on its workforce.
Well said. Yeah.
I agree. I'm marking Anders as valuable to this podcast right now. You are, what's the opposite? You're a deficit to us, Anders.
Anders
I'm
is
both.
an
really
essential worker, and I'm clapping for him. I'm banging my pans out the window for Anders every day at 5.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. God, remember that? All right.
Throwback.
Everybody should read Health Communism. Check it out. There's a lot we didn't even get into. Really interesting stuff. Thank you, Beatrice Adler-Bolton, for joining us. Let our listeners know where they can find the book and all your stuff.
Thanks so much. Yeah. You can order the book from Verso. I think now it's currently only $15 if you pre-order it before it comes out. After it comes out, I think it gets more expensive. So definitely worth it to try and get it on sale because it's a hardcover. But yeah, I mean, if you're interested in reading the book, first time authors like Artie and I, it's hard because you're not proven yet. And we're writing a book called Health Communism. So if you're interested and you want to check it out, we would appreciate that. And we'd love to hear what you think.
And Death Panel, right?
Yep. Hell yeah. We do 2 episodes a week, and I just got to search Death Panel wherever you look for podcasts.
You can find it. You don't have to listen to podcasts.
Search for your local Death Panel.
All right. Thank you, Beatrice.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
This is the new track from Eve 6.
I learned so much about health back there, and I'm ready to take a stand.
Anders Lee's also here.
Anders Lee here. Still.
Hey, everybody.
All right.
It's an hour and 10 minutes into the show.
No, this is the end. This is like an hour 30, I think.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, this is an ep. What do we,
That's an ep.
I guess there was one more thing we were talking about that's related to health, as long as we're doing the health up. Well, what was this? You said there was like a study that came out or something about serotonin?
Was there a new study?
I've a couple articles have come across my desk.
Did I miss the latest study?
Well, I think doctors are starting to admit that they have known for a long time that serotonin levels don't necessarily have anything to do with depression.
There are like 5 main neurotransmitters.
Is
You
it all about
understand?
midichlorians?
That's one of them.
Okay.
That's the one that makes you a Jedi.
It's about which organs you grow.
Yeah, okay.
If you
Yeah.
don't grow the right ones.
All right,
you
well,
get
tell me the
depressed.
serotonin thing.
He was kind of a Jedi, the way he wore that cloak.
Yeah.
So there's like a handful of the main neurotransmitters that regulate everything about your central nervous system. And it's like a vast oversimplification to be like, dopamine is the happy one. Serotonin is like the good times one. You know, like adrenaline.
You know you be sleeping when the serotonin hits.
Yeah, norepinephrine is like adrenaline. Like the way like colloquially like adrenaline is thought of is like this thing that pumps.
See, the
into
thing
your
is, if
brain.
it gets more complicated than this, I will not be able to follow these important
It's-
inhibitors or whatever.
5 things or whatever, like a handful of things, and the vast amount of ways you can feel are in that. Like a combination of those 5. It was crazy to oversimplify what's happening, right? But it's also like advantageous to capital. It sells a lot of pills to like make these commercials where there's a little sad cloud, and he's like, I don't have enough dopamine.
Oh, I can't rain because my dopamine's not right, and all the other clouds make fun of me
Yeah,
until I got Blossophyll.
so like what serotonin.
I'm a cloud, my dick doesn't work.
They should make a fucking Viagra commercial of the little
cloud.
the little Zoloft
My
guy.
cloud partner and I have an understanding that this is still what's best for me.
Here's how SSRIs work, right? So one of the neurotransmitters in your central nervous system, serotonin, basically the way it works, the way it was transmitted from like cell to cell along your nerves is that there are these things called axons, and the way they describe axons in like biopsych is that it's like a train car if you're in like the New York transit system, right? And like, you know, there's those little doors in between them.
Thank you for New Yorking this analogy for us.
That's where most of our listeners
Let's say you're off to see the Mets.
Is it a local? Is it an express?
It's the G train. It's the worst. Yeah. And so, you know, there's little doors in between the trains. Like if you're
Sure.
in one,
I'm terrified to use those, but yeah.
yeah, you're outside all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So you are serotonin, right? You're in the you're in the back car of the G train.
Sure, I
You need
am.
to get to the front car of the G train because someone took a shit in the back one, and you're like, oh my god, I thought there were going to be all these free seats in here. Why did I think
Right.
that the world had blessed me with a free train car? Someone took a shit in here.
This happens all the time when I'm serotonin.
So you go to the next one by going in between those two. You open the door, you step out in between the two cars, and then you open the next door and go in, right? So what SSRIs do, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is that some of the serotonin that steps out into the outside of the cars, that's like where your blood and shit is, doesn't get allowed back into the next car. So it inadvertently kind of floods your system with a bunch of extra serotonin. And the argument is, well, it wasn't getting that. It's supposed to get some of it, but for whatever reason, you had an imbalance and you weren't getting it. So it hacks your central nervous system into leaking serotonin out of these little microtransactions that happen between train cars. And this happens like a bazillion times a second as, you know, your nerves work and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And that's like wildly experimental. And they also just all came up with these drugs while like trying to make like a cure for restless leg syndrome or whatever. And then
The leg keeps shaking.
like Viagra or something they came up with while they were trying to create like a blood thinner for like heart
Right,
disease
yeah.
and shit like that. Like everything is come up with on accident.
All modern drugs were invented in an experiment to kill just Japanese people in 1935.
Basically. So, you know, then they kind of found that when they tested this stuff on probably some mental patients that were just laying around in a facility somewhere in this horrible system, and they were like, throw it at them or whatever. Or they tested it on people for money or something weird like that. I've done those tests. I know it exists. that it improved like the symptoms of what is diagnosed as depression, which is all itself only a set of diagnoses, and then from there went, all right, label it, make a cartoon commercial, chop it up. This is going to make us $1 bazillion by selling this stuff.
Draw me a cloud. Let's go.
And and for a lot of people, it fucking works, which is, I'm fine with using drugs to regulate your mood. I do it all the time, but it's being sold not as self-regulation, as a drug in that way. It's being sold, through this idea of like health and non-health, right? And like this is, being sold. People put a lot of faith in it,
and also not to mention the people who are just giving it out because they make money from it,
right? To people that like it isn't working for,
right? Or they just probably don't need it in the first place.
Yeah. So like that is always, I studied that when I was in college. It's always been wildly apparent to me because I'm like, what do you mean? Like the study came from nowhere. No one knows what this fucking is. They're lying to you in the commercial or whatever.
The Mucinex man has been lying to me.
That's somebody else's war to fight. I didn't study mucus. I hope somebody else is out there doing that.
He doesn't talk like that.
There's like weird shit they discovered.
Alex's doctor actually is a Mucinex guy.
They discovered at one point that they're like most of the serotonin that's in the human body is in the stomach, and they were just like, what does that mean? Because
you're so happy in there.
Well, because it's like one of those things that does different things in different parts of the body. So in the stomach, it's the thing that helps like your, how you unconsciously move food throughout your system all day, like you're not thinking about that.
Yep,
that's serotonin doing that or whatever.
That motherfucker.
Which might be the problem you have, Alex.
Yeah, I've got low serotonin.
You're a cloud.
I'm up late night. My cloud is fucked up.
Eating a sandwich.
I mean, it's personal experience a little bit. I 10 years ago did SSRIs for the first time, and they like worked too good. Like I had like no anxiety, and it was actually like a problem. Like I was just an idiot.
Just
like,
getting hit by cars.
Well, just
You're a sociopath.
Basically, but I
made $1 million. It was a problem.
But I felt like more depressed, so I went off them, and then I started taking them again a few years later, and they do nothing.
Weird.
Like, absolutely nothing. So I have given up because of insurance. Like every fucking year or two, I have to start the process all over again. And
the body of a clown must change by nature.
It's true.
They should do clowns instead of clouds.
They should do clowns instead of clouds. We all know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that would be a cool antidepressant commercial. Just a clown bawling his eyes out in like a dark room in black and white, and then but then my doctor told me about news.
And juggling or whatever clown. They're getting in the small car because everything is normal again. Well, the thing about the SSRIs is the clown isn't too happy or sad now. He's just like a line mouth clown, like a tight-lipped clown getting into his car.
Most of them just numb you out, which is like a temporary solution for sure.
And anecdotally, a lot of people doing this are like depressed from their lifestyle from their office job.
Exactly.
Yeah, they are sitting in a chair all day, which makes them depressed, and then they take this thing that makes you a little bit in the middle.
Right.
They're all this is advantageous to capital because it just keeps numbing you to the byproducts of the situation that it has created, and then been like, see, and then we came up with a solution. It's like a huge head fuck, right? Yeah. This stuff would nobody ever, that's what Mark Fisher talks about. Nobody ever asks like why this problem exists to begin with. If, it's easy to kind of imagine that it like comes naturally from the situation that capitalism puts you in.
Right. Kind of like we were talking about earlier, like, there's two kinds of people, depressed and not depressed. And, you got to learn how to...
Depressed people got to go. Right. Chris Rock.
Yeah.
Let's move on from that. Well, that's a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, let's get the fuck out of here.
There's so much to say about my ailments.
I don't know. Health was a good topic. We were, abundant with ideas today.
Right.
Round of applause, everyone.
Body is reality, man.
Health is everywhere. Truly.
Health is everywhere.
Well, who among us is everywhere doing their shows this week?
Oh, you can come see us do our performance art where we rip organs out of our guts and show them to you and tattoo them.
You can. No dates listed for that.
You think that movie
Coming up.
The guy in that movie would have to like plug those shows.
Yeah.
Like, come on out to Pete's Candy Store. I'm gonna be. I'm growing something.
You can see me at the Brooklyn Comedy Collective growing a fourth kidney. Then my wife fucking tears that shit out of me.
I've been booked at the Funny Bone. I don't think they know what they're in for, though.
Yeah, I'm growing a funny bone.
You're gonna laugh. You're gonna laugh tonight, everybody.
Fuck. I don't think I have anything. I'm open. Actually, I think this next Wednesday at I'm gonna mispronounce this in a bad way. Fredo's Bar Fredo or something in Ridgewood. I think I'm gonna open for this band called Fixation.
It's an anti-Italian slur.
It's at like 9. Come at 8. Get it early. There's like a bunch of bands and shit.
Yeah, it's tricky what kind of show you're going to, because like at a comedy show, it's usually expected that it like will start on time, but for a music show, it's like, yeah, we're gonna be hanging out for 3 hours, so make sure you're before I start, because then I'm only on for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a different vibe. Just come hang out, watch a show. Music's cool. It's cool.
Music is cool.
I have a show tonight, so
That's not gonna help
thank you
you.
for coming to it retroactively.
Yeah, it's so dope.
I plugged it last week,
Yeah, it's so
and you were there.
look that
So
up.
I thank you.
Look that up, and
Wait.
also you already went to it.
I might put this up right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's still ticking
By the
for some-
time they get to the end of it, just think about this logic.
All right.
Just follow Andrew's Twitter, and he'll put it up on there.
Add Anders Lee here.
There you go. There you go. I'm not doing anything too exciting. Go to my Twitter at Patak Test Kitchen, PTAK Test Kitchen. I got a new podcast where we read Quoras, mostly to figure out like what the fuck's going on Quora. If you like medical questions, you're gonna love the Quor Raiders podcast.
They email me like every day, like, who would win in a fight, the Hulk or Superman?
We're
Like, it's
mostly
always
just
a-
reading the emails so far.
Okay.
There's no guests yet or anything. It's just me and Jeremy Kaplowitz reading Quoras. We're the number 41 comedy podcast in Ukraine this week.
Nice.
We're making a deciding factor for the heroes of Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
The war is turning.
Bunch of Nazis listening to your podcast, asking Quora questions.
It's funny for whites like me.
the final Quora.
I like this half Jewish podcast a lot. Yeah, check that out. That's just started, so that's fun. And that's all I have for now.
Oh, the new Eve 6 album is out. You should listen to that and buy it and stuff, and look at the beautiful photograph.
Buy
that is the
vinyl.
album cover.
And stare into Jake's eyes while you go to sleep.
There's a shirt too. It's like of me wearing another shirt. It's real weird.
That's really confusing.
All right, it's finished. Body is reality. Anders, do the noise. Oh God.
Why did you...